Hi everyone, welcome back to The Red Thread, a Left Voice podcast where we bring theory to life and discuss how to dismantle capitalism one conversation at a time. I'm Melanie.
And I'm Emma.
Today we're going to talk about Severance, which according to Apple TV is its most watched show ever, and it has its own cult following, including us. Severance was the hottest show of the last quarter, and in fact we had to wait 12 whole quarters before getting season 2. That is in part because of the SAG-AFTRA and WGA strikes of 2023. So the wait was very worth it for class struggle. Shout out to writers and actors who make the shows we love.
So there's plenty of angles we can analyze this show from. Big tech, corporate surveillance, cults. But for today's episode, we've decided to focus on the theme of alienation of labor. Be warned, if you're not caught up, there might be some spoilers.
So as you know, if you've watched, Severance's premise is a sci-fi scenario in which employees at a company called Lumon undergo a surgical procedure that splits their consciousness in two: their work self, their innie, and their regular non-work self, their outie.
And in theory, that separation of consciousness allows people to enjoy their personal lives without taking work home with them, as the saying goes. If they're going through trauma, depression, or misery in their daily lives, like Mark, they can escape all that for 8 hours a day. Meanwhile, their work selves can devote complete attention to their jobs because it's literally all they know.
Yeah, go to work and your work self takes over, walk out, and it's all behind you. Sounds too good to be true, maybe.
But the unsettling reality of Severance is that these workers become a kind of imprisoned labor force in a polished yet oppressive corporate environment that coerces and manipulates them into total compliance. Like Miss Huang says to Milchick this season after Irving is fired, effectively killing his innie.
You shouldn't let them have a funeral. It makes them feel like people.
And that's coming from a child worker who is herself under the thumb of this corporation. But yeah, Severance's insane popularity this season is definitely partly because it's such an enrapturing thriller and we all really want to know what happens. But I think it's also because the core concept of the separation of personal life from work and the alienation that results fascinates and resonates with so many people.
Yeah, Dan Erickson has cited his own difficult experiences in corporate jobs as inspiration for the series. So as unique as the premise is, it's also completely tied to real life.
So with that, we want to discuss Marx's idea of the alienation of labor and the many layers of severance that we think represent this powerful idea.
So let's head on down to the severed floor of Lumon. Here, the innie exists only to work. They're cut off from their own memories, so they have no access to their own history, culture, or any sense of life outside the office. And the work they're doing is simple, repetitive, and seemingly pointless. Or more precisely, for most of the show, neither we nor they have any idea what the point of it is. As Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote in the Communist Manifesto, owing to the extensive use of machinery and to the division of labor, the work of the proletarians has lost all individual character, and consequently all charm for the workman. He becomes an appendage of the machine, and it is only the most simple, most monotonous, and most easily acquired knack that is required of him.
Meanwhile, the outie faces everyday life, depression, stress, trauma, but is very much bound to the same system. After all, we saw in the beginning of season 2 how Dylan and his family relied on his job at Lumon, and when he tried to get a job somewhere else, they wouldn't hire him because he had this stigma of being severed, which left him in a desperate position.
And in real life, many of us wake up exhausted, upset, or outraged by the world around us, and still muster the energy to get up and go to jobs where we feel taken advantage of and have no say or control over anything. Because if we don't, then we'll end up broke, hungry, or unhoused. So in the show, Lumon wants to completely separate the workers' personal lives from their jobs at Lumon and remove even that residual awareness, ensuring that workers remain oblivious to how or why their labor is exploited.
And being kept in the dark like that is disempowering, to say the least. Within Severance, Lumon is the ultimate evil corporate bad guy, but I will also say that at the end of the day, every company wants to do what Lumon does. All corporations exploit their workers and look for ways to maximize that exploitation to stay profitable. In real-world companies, management similarly expects workers to not bring in outside problems, like, say, our debilitating grief from the death of our wife.
Or our daddy issues from having a creepy corporate monster for a father.
Or our mysterious underground spy skills that we want to use to take down an evil company.
But for real, in our personal lives, we deal with mental health challenges, economic precarity, or family struggles. But once we show up at work, the expectation is that we leave all that behind. No complaining, no union talk, no questioning, just do your job.
Right. And they expect us not to question the social or environmental damage our labor might produce. They want tech workers to build the very code that powers surveillance and militarism, like Project Nimbus, which is a cloud computing contract between Google, Amazon, and the state of Israel to surveil and bomb Palestinians.
They push workers to keep extracting oil, all while having no say in how we transition to green energy.
Our knowledge goes into developing medical treatments and vaccines, only for them to end up behind paywalls in private institutions out of reach for most people.
We design and construct massive, futuristic buildings we'll never live in, while struggling to pay our own rent. Time and again, technological and scientific advancements, born from collective human effort, are privatized, hidden from society, and even from the very workers who create them.
What does this separation between work life and real life, between the labor we perform and the products that result from that labor, have to do with Marxism? Let's transition for a minute from Helly and Marx to Hegel and Marx.
The roots of this idea go back to German philosopher Hegel, who wrote about alienation in a more abstract, idealist sense. For Hegel, alienation was about consciousness becoming estranged from itself when it meets the external world. It was a philosophical concept of mind and spirit.
Marx took Hegel's idea and grounded it in material reality. Marx argued that alienation isn't just a mental state, it's tied to how we produce and reproduce our daily lives. Under capitalism, our labor and its products belong to somebody else, that being the capitalist who hires us. The moment we step into the workplace, we lose control over what we do, how we do it, and why we do it.
Well, Karl Marx provided a more focused analysis of why we hate work so much in the Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844.
I know that title might sound a little boring, but I promise it's actually awesome. Marx described alienation as a process in which the product of labor becomes this external, hostile power over the worker, and he identified 4 key aspects of alienation in capitalist society.
The first aspect he writes about is the alienation of the product of one's labor. This basically means that as workers, we have no control or say over what we produce. Innies and outies alike have no idea what their work at Lumon is accomplishing. They just move the numbers that make them feel things and are told it's mysterious and important. The MDR team is rewarded for their seemingly pointless work with a culty waffle party, but later learn that they're unknowingly helping the repulsive Dr. Maurer to experiment on Gemma's emotions and psyche.
In real life, we can go back to the examples we just gave a minute ago. Workers who work collectively to make products or provide services, but have virtually no say in how they produce it. In capitalist society, the object that gets produced is lost to the producer.
Another aspect is alienation within the labor process itself. Marx puts this as losing control of your life activity. We work as a way to keep ourselves alive. Our work becomes someone else's gain, splitting life into alien labor and leisure, which is really just an escape from work. Free time feels like freedom from doing anything. Activity becomes compulsion, while freedom is consumption, mindless fun, or just blowing off steam. Only in class society is activity tied to suffering and leisure to idleness. Our labor isn't self-expression, but self-denial. Under capitalism, our labor is just another commodity to be bought and sold.
Yeah, and another aspect is alienation from one's species being and the essence of one's humanity, basically. In other words, we become alienated from ourselves. This alienation of self is the essence of Severance. The show dramatizes it by showing how the innie is cut off from any other dimension of life. No culture, no community, no personal projects. Even the concept of personhood is denied to the innie. And in real life, workers become estranged from our own bodies, mental faculties, and broader creative potential. Humans are naturally creative and social, but under capitalism, we're reduced to cogs in a machine, performing narrow tasks for survival.
The final aspect Marx lays out for us is alienation from other humans. Social relations are reduced to market transactions and competitions under capitalism. Instead of cooperating as equals, workers are pitted against each other or forced into hierarchies. In Severance, the employees operate in isolation or small teams, subjected to punishments like the break room and manipulative reward systems like music dance experiences. They can't fully trust each other because of the constant corporate surveillance and fabricated myths, like MDR having larva-filled pouches and a history of violent uprisings.
And of course, in real life, we do not get to collaborate as equals in our workplaces. We're pitted against each other and divided. Personally, my managers are obsessed with playing the blame game and acting like my coworkers in other departments who work just as hard as me every day are the reason for all our problems. Hint, it's actually them, my managers.
Right, we're constantly pitted against each other, whether by job titles, hierarchies, tier systems, or worse, gender, race, and other forms of oppression.
So, to sum it up, while Hegel understood alienation in more general or philosophical terms, Marx pinpointed it as a specific feature of work under capitalism.
In these dystopian shows, it's always easier to imagine the end of the world or a future where humans are even more exploited by technology rather than a better society.
Yeah, they almost never provide a deeper understanding of how the search for profit is connected to exploitation and how there could be an alternative to capitalism in which human potential can be used for human society instead of for exploitation and destruction.
In other works, Marx elaborates on how capital subordinates not only the immediate labor of workers, but also the entire process of cooperation, scientific progress, and technological development, using all of these for its own ends.
Yeah, labor and its products appear alien to the worker, existing beyond the worker's will, and social relationships themselves occur through exchange relationships. This structure is at the heart of exploitation.
Workers, separated from the means of production, have to sell their labor power to capitalists. In doing so, they generate enough value to cover their own wages, but also surplus value, which is the basis of capitalist profit.
We don't know what Season 3 of Severance has in store, although we would love to hear your predictions. Custody battle between Helly R., Helena Egan, and Mark S., perhaps? But based on real life, I think it's safe to say that the product Lumon has created and wants to unleash on the world was invented to make them even more rich, not to make human life better.
The thing about work is that if not for capitalism, work wouldn't be so atrocious that anyone would consider having brain surgery just to stop experiencing it. If we worked to make life good for ourselves and our communities by building climate-friendly infrastructure, producing clean food, and perfecting tools to make life safer and easier, well, first of all, we would have way less work to do all around, but we would also be personally invested and connected to our work. We'd feel pride, motivation, and enjoyment in our work that would completely transcend the drudgery we see in Severance.
You know the phrase, you don't hate Mondays, you hate capitalism. Well, it's kind of true.
Exactly. Alienation from our labor isn't a natural state of affairs. It's the result of toiling in a class society that has severed us from our labor, the objects of our creation, each other, and even ourselves. But it doesn't have to be this way.
You may have noticed at some point in life that given a little free time and resources, people actually love to engage in productive activity. That's why so many people love sourdough, but also like crocheting, gardening, making art, making music, dancing. Producing is life activity. We all also deserve time to rest, relax, and be idle, but labor is a part of what makes us human. And when it's a form of self-expression and creativity, it can actually be really fulfilling.
We know another world is possible. A world where labor is entitled to all it creates, where we can democratically decide what, how, when, and for what ends we produce, from tech to manufacturing to education. A world where we make these decisions in coordination with other workers, students, communities, to serve not the few, but the collective needs of humanity and the natural world.
Helly R says it best in the final episode of season 2, when she says,
"They give us half a life and think we won't fight for it."
She shows us that as workers and oppressed people, we know we're meant to do more than be bossed around and give up our lives to make things we don't want. Even in the most dire conditions, as the capitalist system attempts to sever us from ourselves and each other, we're always going to fight back.
Well, that's it for this episode of The Red Thread. We're on Instagram at The Red Thread Pod, and for more news and analysis from Left Voice, go to leftvoice.org.
And if you like this episode, make sure you share it with everyone you know, or we're sending you straight to the break room.